It is 6 o'clock. Eastern Standard Time, and we are the PoP Baking Club, and we are making a Yule Log tonight. I am going to take you all through the process of getting your components together, everything from the Genoise to the filling to beginner, intermediate, and advanced decorations, because this is the kind of baked project that you can bring everything completed. I have everything I need on my speed rack here, from all the decor, the cakes, everything. And you bring it, and I call it go time. It's when you get to put everything together and finish it, and it's very relaxing. It is a woodland theme. I love the Yule Log. Sometimes it's a Bûche de Noël. It depends on how Christmassy you go. But I'm going to focus on, I just love the woodland theme. And also, a Yule Log began, you know, when there were pagan rituals of lighting a fire and acknowledging that the winter solstice was upon us and that it was cold and dark. And this fire gave us safety and good luck for the next year and throughout the winter. So a Yule Log really is a cake that is shaped like a log. And as hearths and open fires became fewer and fewer, they just sort of course, the French brought it into their kitchen and turned it into a beautiful cake, a confection. And now they're popular all over the world. They're still popular in countries that are Francophiles. And, you know, Dave and I went to Quebec City last year and we just love it. So when I saw that it was, you know, in France and Switzerland and Quebec, I was like, of course it is. And also it's everywhere now. It's in Spain and Japan, and it's here in the United States. And we see a lot of them that are very fancy in magazines and on Instagram and in blogs where it's a showpiece. But this is something that can be very simple and it can be family friendly. So if you're wanting to do something with your kids, super fun. Nobody's fingers will get hurt. That's a good thing. So I am Kathleen. I am a certified executive pastry chef, and I teach live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a recipe my viewers picked last week. And last week they picked the Yule Log, so that's what I'm teaching tonight. I've been in the industry since I was 15. I have taught at the college level for years, and I teach now on social media. I teach on TikTok, Substack, and on YouTube. I wrote notes, and these notes live on Substack. In my notes, I talk about all the details of the ingredients that I'm using, ideas for design, the history of it, and then I happen to add 3 recipes and some photos of Yule Logs I've done, Yule Logs my classes have done, which is really fun because when 6 to 12 people do a Yule Log, we get like a class photo. It's very fun. Yep, time for fit check. When I work in the kitchen, I keep it simple. I wear a inexpensive, clean white apron. I work in a chef's jumpsuit, but you want to work in clothes that aren't going to get caught in your equipment and that are safe. And I like to be comfortable. When I get my apron, I feel like I'm at work. I wear clogs or non-slip. I have very short fingernails, no jewelry on, no jewelry, no nail polish, and minimal makeup and my glasses. I like to pay attention to sanitation, but it must be noted that I'm basically in a living room. This is not a functioning kitchen, so I do have a sanitation bucket. I've washed my hands, but I will be using gloves on and off. And it's really important that when you are making desserts for other people, that it might not seem like a big deal, and if you wash your hands, that you are not going to pass on foodborne illness. But during the holidays, there's a lot going on. So if you can get a box of gloves or make sure that you're being very careful, not touching your hair, your face. I have the cakes, and I'll put it like this because you can see me grab a few things. So these are my cakes. We're going to work backwards a little bit. This is one jelly roll, and this is how I wrap it. When I bake a cake, a jelly roll, I do not roll it right out of the oven, but I wrap it so that the moisture stays inside. Here are my chocolate twigs. I'm going to show you how to make some decor. I made some meringue decorations, which I am going to show you how to make. The recipe I use is a French meringue. And the good thing about a French meringue is that it bakes and dries very crispy. And that's good because you don't want anything on your Yule Log to be sticky or too soft. These are little bird's nests. That's what the bottom of these meringue bird's nests look like. They've gotten just a little bit of color on them. I baked them at 170 because my oven would not go any lower, but 150 degrees Fahrenheit is kind of ideal. Here's another, and these are cocoa nibs. On each tray, I pipe the same size decoration so that when they bake, they all bake at the same rate. These are my meringue mushroom tops, and you can tell when a meringue is done when it just comes up without any trouble. That's the bottom, and that's the top. So this one I sprinkled a little cocoa powder on, and these I'm going to turn into lichen. I'm gonna lichen the lichen. These are my twigs, and these are the stems for the mushrooms. A fat short stem and a long stem. So I make the meringue by taking egg whites with salt and sucrose. And I get the warm egg whites that I have scaled that are room temperature into the mixer on a whip, and I break up the proteins that are in the egg whites. Once it starts to foam a tiny bit, I add the salt and a third of the sucrose. This allows some of the sucrose to start to dissolve in the egg whites, the water that lives in there, and it doesn't weigh down the egg whites so much that you have to whip it on high or for a super long time. Then I add the second third and then the final third, all within the first couple of minutes, and then I whip it on medium until it is medium to firm peak, and that doesn't mean stiff and dry and all the way. It means it's still shiny, it's got a nice peak to it, but it's flexible. So when it goes in the oven, it will still have a little bit of room to grow. And then at the end of mixing, I fold in 10x, which is powdered sugar, which has 3 to 5% cornstarch. Cornstarch is what holds the water that lives in the egg whites and stabilizes your meringue. And when you're all done, if you want, you can still tap just a little bit of powdered sugar or 10x on the top of your meringues before they go in the oven, and that will help dry them out. Doing a meringue is one whole thing. So if you can keep it simple, use the fundamentals to get a good meringue, you will be able to start with a lot of really nice decorations, and that's one component. So that's what's kind of fun about this. You are putting a lot of things together. I am not going to use a tip. It's one of my things is as many things that I can do without using a pastry tip. That's a good thing. It cuts down on all the stuff that you have to buy or own, and you can do a lot just with a pastry bag and some scissors. And I will show you, it is stiff. And I made it today, and I was a little worried that it would separate, and I really didn't want any problems. And what I mean by separate is when you look in there, if there's any water separating in there, that means your meringue is not very stable. Now I want you to see how flexible this is. First of all, look how shiny it is. That means I didn't whip it until it was dry, and I whipped it on medium, not on high. So it's nice and shiny, and it has a little bit of flexibility. It has strength, but it still is a little bit loose, and I'm fine with that because I'm not building decorations that need a ton of structure. They're all kind of flat. If I wanted to build something really tall and structured or stiff, I would use the meringue right away. I wouldn't let it sit. But this meringue didn't need to be cooked. It's not a Swiss meringue. It's just a simple French meringue stabilized with 10x. And that is my favorite for this project. And I did cover it with plastic to touch and also over the top. And you always want to pipe more than you need because of breakage. So I'm going to line my trays with a parchment. I like them to be nice and clean. So you want to give it a good crease and then cut it so it's nice and straight. And when I tell you this project, you're not good at piping or using a pastry bag, this is a really good project for beginners because it doesn't matter that they're perfect. The regularity in the wild and in nature is what is good. It's actually what the human eye likes. It's interesting. That's sort of what the woodland theme is. It's nature. It's a regularity. So I am going to pull my meringue. Here's my plastic pastry bag. If you use a fabric pastry bag that you've used before and you've used fat or buttercream in the bag, it's going to break down the egg white in the meringue, and that's not good. That's why I use plastic so that I get a good result. So I am going to do the smallest to the biggest, and the smallest would be the twigs. That way, when I cut a hole in the bag, I start small and then I can get bigger. So So I'm gonna take this and I'm just gonna do a little bit. And when you work with a pastry bag, all you need to do, if you don't have one of those things on the back to hold it shut, is to remember this is what you're using to hold the bag. So you put that in there and you turn it. And then you pull it in and everything is between here. That way, if you're squeezing it and it's really in there, you're not going to strain your wrist or your hand and nothing will come out the back. But if that's a problem, just wrap it with a rubber band, or Wilton has some bag ties that work really nice. So if you take your meringue and just tab each corner with a little bit of meringue, there's no fat in here. So when you wash meringue, it comes right off. Do not add water. If anything, that's going to make your parchment curl, and it's counterindicated. So you want to make sure that your parchment stays flat. And this is a good way to hold your bag when you're not using it. When you make twigs, whether you are doing it with chocolate or with meringues, you start with one center, and you can, if you go fast like this, it'll be thin. If you go a little bit slower, it allows it to be a little bit thicker. It really kind of doesn't matter to me because we're going to build on it. And I'm going to go in between these pieces. And now what you need to know is that when you bake these, all the little pieces that you make, you're going to lose a lot. It's okay. So we're going to make a lot, and even if these break in half, it's okay because it will still look really good. So this is the top of the twig, and I am going to start taking little pieces, and do you see how I'm running them down the center? And they don't really look like twigs yet. They just kind of look like I've gone back and forth. Every time I take this down the center, I am building up a stronger middle. If I'm really tight, then I will make the lines just a little bit closer. It really doesn't matter. Nothing needs to be perfect. You could make them, you know, squiggly, wobbly, long, short, whatever you want. And they're very white. Now, if you want to tinge your meringue, do it when you are whipping the egg whites, because then the water in the egg whites will help the food coloring dissolve. I would use powdered food coloring so that you don't affect the moisture content of the meringue. But typically your meringue is very white and very shiny. But when you begin making and deciding what ingredients you're using and what flavor profile, you are beginning to design the final look, color, texture, etc. This is what it looks like from my perspective. Now I'm gonna finish it with just tiny bits of detail. And if I had cut the hole too big, I couldn't do these little details. So you want a really small cut for your bag. The building up of the center is really where my strength is going to come. Meringue is really lightweight, and it's a really good way to get rid of egg whites. A long time ago, meringues were designed in wood fire stoves, where at the end of the baking day, when the whole community would bake their bread, what was left was a little bit of residual heat. So people would make meringues and they would put them in the oven overnight to dry out. They're not going to puff up that much so that they won't be touching. They will just puff a tiny bit. When you bake at 150 degrees Fahrenheit to 170, you can stop once they're dry and they'll pop off and they'll be beautiful and white and glossy. If you continue to leave them in the oven and they begin to caramelize a little bit, the sweetening power or sweetness does not change, but it does have a little bit more flavor and it'll bring out a little bit of color. I have done meringues in dehydrators. They remain very, very white, very, very shiny. They're always a little bit chewy. So I like a crisp meringue. These cocoa nibs are beautiful, but basically you want to sprinkle these on, and whatever you don't stick, you can end up reusing. But this is such a simple way to make that look like a twig. And these are all about the same size. So this is one tray. This is my next quarter sheet tray. I'm going to do the corners, little bitty dots to hold down my parchment. If anyone tries to tell you that this isn't the way to go, I would say it 1000% is. I keep my bags very, very clean. And I make sure that nothing is coming out this end. So I stop a lot. It doesn't really take up more time to stay clean. It actually prevents a lot of problems. And I clean my bag up. This is in here, nice and tight. This is off. I need to make some mushroom stems, and there's two ways to make the mushroom stems. One way to make a mushroom is to make a little short like this, and then your cap goes on the top, and it's just a little short guy. Other way is to make a stem like this. It does give you a back though, because whatever's on here is flat. So I like to make stems that are very long and kind of squiggly so I can have some tall ones. I like to make some shorter and fatter ones. And on here I'm going to do half the long stems and then I'll do half the fatter guys. And I am not going to make my tip any bigger. And the reason that I do different sizes is because when you start adding these to your Yule log, you have to be able to get a little bit of variability on the height. So if they're all the same size, not only is that boring, I like them to curve a little bit. I'm going to show you how easy it is to make leaves with a bag like this. You don't need a special tip. All you need is to cut a good V shape. Once you've made a V, so you squeeze it and pull, squeeze and pull, or you can make leaves like this. And when these bake, they will look like leaves. I would want a little bit stiffer meringue because those are getting a little bit soft. And now that I've done that and just demonstrated, I'm going to straighten this out and we are going to move to making the mushroom tops. So I made that just a little bit bigger. You don't have to worry about the pull off. And go slow and not overthink it. Perpendicular situation. And you can make these as big or small as you want, but they should be close in size. If I were doing this for a big project, I would do all of one kind on a tray. My stems and my twigs. The last thing we are going to do are the mushroom caps. And I'll show you the lichen. It's basically a mushroom cap. So as you can see, it's not like you need to have like really fancy piping skills. It's basically just like the little stem we just made, only they're going to be flat. Or you can make a cute little mushroom cap. So these I can take matcha or cocoa powder and I can sprinkle it over the top. And now I'm going to make bigger, fatter ones. And if these are not perfect, it will look good. That's the genius of making the meringue mushrooms, is it's very easy. You can add the powdered sugar now, the cocoa powder or the matcha, or you can do it after they bake. Super Grande Belgian sugar, it's non-melting. It needs to go on when your meringue is wet, otherwise it will not stick. So I'll do just a couple. I like to have a little bit of variability. And if you have other things that can go in the oven at low temp that are different colors, it's really fun to use those. This is desiccated coconut. It will turn slightly brown. So when you're thinking about keeping things white versus keeping them tinged beige and golden rich colors, you need to think about how are these things going to color in the oven. The sucre ground won't color at all. The coconut has a lot of fat, so it will bring on, and sugar, so it will bring on the Maillard reaction and get a little bit brown. This is a brown raw sugar, and that's very pretty. We're getting into a different color profile. How easy this is. 1, 2, 3, into the oven. They go. I'll take you with me. The oven has kind of a strange configuration. So I'm using the top oven, so I'm gonna put 2 up here. While it's not super hot, this is going to help create an air insulation, and it's gonna help it from getting too dark on the bottom. 170 is not a bad temperature, and I don't even need to set a timer. And in fact, I could leave those, turn off the oven before I go to bed, just leave them in there overnight. If you are going to be working with chocolate and doing chocolate decor, you have 2 choices: real chocolate and candy melts. Real chocolate requires that you know what you're doing, that you understand when you melt chocolate that you might be taking it out of temper. So I'm skipping over that. I want to make things easy. These were at the grocery store. They also make white ones. They're called candy melts. Cane sugar, vegetable oil, hydrogenated palm kernel and palm oil, non-fat milk solids, soy lecithin, salt. The oil is meant to give you a certain flow, a certain set, and to be easy. It's not fussy. So these are great. The way to handle any of this is to very gently put your hand underneath the parchment so that you can lift things up. You want to be very careful to not hold these in a way that they will break. So you're going to find the strongest part. Don't worry if they break. They will break. Do you see how the irregularity looks really pretty? And as we add these to the Yule log in groups of 3, how pretty it's going to look. And we're going to do it very similarly as to what we did with the meringue. I really do like to take pastry bags and put them into cups. I have these little Cambro bowls. What I do to melt chocolates anyway is 45 seconds to start. As they're still pretty solid, 15 to 30 seconds. And then once they're really quite melted, you have to bring it down to a 15-second blast. No more. If you scorch this, if there's any smell or anything, you're done. You can't use them. When I need to stir the chocolates in between blasts, I'm not wiping it and getting this all dirty. If you can get a nice little microwave-safe plastic, you're good to go. So I'm gonna go put these in my microwave for 45 seconds. So these melt sort of in stages. You can see how they're glistening and they're still solid. So I'm really just making sure that they're not stuck to the bottom, and I'm gonna do that was 45 seconds, I'm going to do 30. And you don't take it all the way. Even if there's little lumps, those will come out just by sitting for a moment. I think this is going to be enough. Candy melts melt really nice. They just have vegetable oil in them, that's why. So even if there's little lumps, I'm gonna just stir them out. So I'm going to take this chocolate and put it into this smaller pastry bag than the one I just used. And you have to kind of have a plan, what you want to make, what you're going to do. Keep pictures for inspiration in front of you, because once you start this process, everything's going to harden up very quickly. So you're just going to have to work very quick. So here is my chocolate in my little bag. And I'm going to close it. You have to think about it's flowing out. With other things like buttercream and meringue, you have to squeeze it out of it. This is flowing out. So you definitely have your off and you have your on. So I'm going to take off about this much. You know, maybe I'll just put a little chocolate so that my parchment doesn't slide when I show you. So I'm gonna do the same thing I did last time. Start with the middle and do a couple center twigs. Twist. I'm going to kind of move quickly and just do a little random up and down, and I can come back and add. And you can make your twigs very realistic, or you can make them a little more modern. A lot of Yule logs are very modern. People are doing entremet and ganache coverings and mirror glazes and things. But you can see how really it's just up and down, always ending in the center, because that's where you need to have the strength. And then for me to get little bits of whimsy and extra branches, if you notice any thin areas, go ahead and build up. There are just no rules. It's so fun. And you can go anywhere and pick out colors. You could do gold and silver dragées just sprinkled on here. Anything you want, you can make it. And if you use other colors, you can really dial in a style, some kind of look that you're going for. And you can even use luster dust and glitters that are edible, which is kind of fun. This is the Sucre Grande. If I missed it because it's already firmed up, then it won't stick. So you have to think about in advance what your plan is and have everything nearby. And then the cocoa nibs down the center if you want, or you can sprinkle the whole thing. These will just stick on their own. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of chocolate, just a little bit of an oval. If you work before it solidifies too much, you can take this and make it more like a leaf. You can drag this through and give it a center. There are a lot of ways to play with the chocolates. Make it porcupine-y. So now these just need to sit and solidify. That's it. It's so easy. But I would start with candy melts unless you're super confident with chocolate. Let's roll these. Let's do it. We're gonna do this. I'm ready to work. Are you guys ready to work? So I have 2 cakes. I used yellow because when I cover these with chocolate icing, I want you to be able to see the yellow cake stick out. You need to seal this cake so that it stays moist and it doesn't dry out. It's basically a crumb coat, but it's very important. This is a whipped cream I whipped today. I made a Genoise. It's from the Wayne Gislin textbook, Professional Baking. The Genoise technique, the sponge method, is an egg foam leavened cake. If you are making a jelly roll and trying to use an American high ratio butter or sugar cake, it will not work. The butter in it is going to be firm and brittle. If it's cold, you won't be able to bend it, and it's just too strong. The Genoise or jelly roll is designed with the cake flour having low protein, which makes it more tender, more delicate. The reason a jelly roll rolls is because it's the proper formula. A lot of American Genoise and sponge cakes have butter in them. I don't recommend those recipes. A formula that has no butter in it is going to roll better. This cake can sit like this. In 5 days, I could open it up and roll it into a cake and it'd be fine. There's nothing about this that won't last up to 7 days. It could start to dry out, especially if it's not wrapped properly, but pop it in the fridge where there's a lot of humidity and it'll soften right back up. So I don't take my cakes out of the oven, put a towel on them and roll them. You are rolling it and then it cools and then you have to unroll it and re-roll it. To me, that's too much handling. When you do a Genoise, you are not spraying your pan with pan spray. There is a parchment under here and it's just poured in here and it's ready to go. And I'm gonna roll one in this direction this way, so it's thinner and longer. And the other one, I'm going to roll this way, so it's much bigger. The thinner one can be cut into smaller Yule logs, or you can use those pieces for your little branch that comes off your main log. And I like minis. I love a miniature plated dessert that is a Yule log. As long as your cake is covered in icing of some sort, or glaze or ganache, it will not dry out. So you could make it in advance. It's really fun to bring a finished big one on a cutting board or a platter in containers of, or beautiful little bowls full of your toppings, and then allow the guests to decorate the Yule log. This dessert can be interactive, it can be a showstopper, or it can be simple. It can be rustic and casual, or it can be very sophisticated. After you've made it into a Yule log, before you put the decor, if it's airtight, you can freeze it for up to 4 months. This American buttercream has no butter, it's just shortening. So this can go into my jelly roll, get wrapped, iced, and then sit on the countertop for up to 7 days. But if you use a European buttercream with real butter, whipped cream, a curd, a pastry cream, those have 7 days in the refrigerator. Ready to eat food for safety can go 7 days from the time that it's made. So if you made the pastry cream 2 days ago, the clock is ticking. You have 5 days to store it in the refrigerator. So whatever the weakest link that needs the most refrigeration ingredient is the one that determines where your cake goes. Whether it stays on the countertop, it's a centerpiece. You can put it on your buffet and it can just sit out all day. But if it has fresh berries in it or lemon cream or something like that, it's going to have to go in the refrigerator. But even then, I recommend you bring it out an hour or 2 before you serve it so it can come fully to room temperature. So what I'm going to do is fill the first one, and I am going to put on gloves to do this. But if you are making food for other people, especially during the holidays, there are a lot of foodborne illnesses and viruses going around, and you're around people who either you don't know their health status, or they're elderly, they're immune compromised, or they're very, very young. You need to be very, very careful. Okay, so I wrap it very, very tight, very moist. And I'm going to pick it up. This is what it looks like. A little bit came off on the plastic. It's thin, but flexible. Do you see that? This recipe, I just can't recommend it enough. So if you've never done a jelly roll or you're nervous, you really want to find a recipe that works, because if you're fighting things you didn't expect or you don't understand, you aren't going to win. The ingredients are going to win. So you want to pre-think and pick a formula that works for what you're doing. So what I want to do is put my hands underneath and make sure that this is all, you know, not stuck. What I'm going to do is put a clean parchment on here, flip it, and when you pull parchment off of a cake like this, you don't lift up, you lift this way. And you want to go very slowly so that you don't tear it. And you want to go around and pull with the cake. There we go. And even then, you have to be so careful. When I roll it, it's going to become the interior, and then this is what will be on the outside. And when you add your fillings to your jelly roll, it's a lot like filling the cinnamon into a cinnamon roll. You don't necessarily need to put a lot. It needs to be very even, and you can stop kind of here. When you are rolling a jelly roll, you need to use your spidey senses to imagine the inside. We want it to be round. You know when you've seen and they're like flat and flat, there's no cake in the center and then around the edge. That's just inexperience in the rolling. So to get good at it, you need practice, but you also need to imagine what you're doing and what it looks like. Then you confirm. So once you imagine you did a good job and then you go to slice your cake, you get to put the two combination of ideas together. You think you did a good job, did you do a good job? So that's where the learning kind of lives. So this is just a plain buttercream. I'm just gonna smooth it out a little bit because it's been sitting for a couple hours. It's soft enough. So I'm going to put the icing like so. And I have to be very careful to not tear this cake. So I'm going to go like that and kind of get things moving, but I'm not gonna just lift, because if I do that, I'll have a big chunk of cake that comes with me. So I'm gonna go all the way to the edge, and you can see that I am being very cognizant of how it could tear. So I'm just thinking, and I'm thinking, how am I getting it even, and I'm not lifting the knife. Okay. All the way to the edge. We want the edges to look good even though we are going to be cutting it. And I would say that I typically like it to be really thick and everything, but it's a lot easier to manage if you just go relatively thin. Especially if you're just starting out. All the way to the edge. And if you want, we can roll this up, put it in plastic wrap, and put it in the refrigerator to be dealt with tomorrow. It is a lot easier to crumb coat when it's cold than when it's room temperature like this. But if you put this in the refrigerator unwrapped, the cake would dry out. All right, so I need to kind of determine if I think it's even, and I feel like I need just a little bit more. It feels to me like there are spots that are thin, and this is just a buttercream, sweet. So it serves a lot of people, but it is not fancy. If you want to get fancy, then you can get into fancy buttercreams, European buttercreams, fillings, fresh fruit. You can do anything you want. It just becomes a little bit harder to manage. All right, back together. So what I want to do is pick this up and somehow use my hands in a confident way while peeling back the parchment to turn this first part in and like this. Not just flat, but in. And one of the ways I'm gonna get this to go really nice and round is to pull it toward me, tuck and lift, all the while being aware that there is icing in there that is what I call smooching. Go. Okay. going to get, well, this is my baby now. I'm gonna pick it up like so. And at this point, because it's still soft, if you want, you are in control of its shape. You can use plastic or parchment, and I could have used a longer one. What I mean by that is, if you have a shape that you want a little bit tighter, you can use the plastic or the parchment to get it tighter and then put it in the refrigerator so this solidifies a little bit more. I'm not gonna do that. But I'd say that's a B. Okay, this is gonna go here, and then we're gonna do the next one. So that one I did the long way. I'm gonna do this one the short way, so it's gonna be bigger in circumference. It's like my hair is falling on my face. Okay, so I'm gonna pull it off of here. Flip it over. If you don't take it off of the parchment, you'll have to struggle with it later. So it is really good to address it now. And if you have little wrinkles and things in your cake, your parchment can get stuck in there, or the batter might go underneath it. Don't worry about it. Just go really, I have one right here. Just go really slow. Just take your time. There's no rush. There we go. So I'm going to move this here. If you just leave it, it can tend to flatten. That's why putting them in the refrigerator is kind of nice, because the refrigerator solidifies everything and then you can shape it how you want it and it'll hold. I think jam's really pretty. I've always really liked to add a bright colored jam, but this whipped cream is really soft and you will see how different it is. So you will decide, and you can make this stiffer. It just is a lot harder. And just like with the buttercream being more firm, I don't even need like a spatula for this. This is more about just moisturizing the cake and spreading it around than it is creating a large layer. And if you whip your whipped cream until it's so stiff that it's grainy and curdly, that's not going to taste good. So you want to really think about if it's something you want to use. This is going to be a lot messier. So here we go. So this is going to be a little bit fatter. It's kind of good and bad. Get this going. And this time I really, really want to get this round. Okay. I'm going to leave that there. Normally I would refrigerate it. So if you are doing this, you definitely want to give them a rest in the fridge, and I would wrap them in plastic wrap so they don't dry out. And you could cover these in whipped cream if you want. You could cover that one in whipped cream, or you could do meringue and torch the meringue, or buttercream. Some of what you do inside is going to affect how you can treat it on the outside. This is just a thick cake board. It's very strong. If you're selling them, this isn't a bad way to get them into a box. I love a cake stand, and I like a little one. So this is the fun part. You have to imagine these becoming a log. You have ends that are like this, and then you have a branch. So there are no rules really. You just have to think ahead and determine how big you want the main center part to be. And typically I like to ice these and then cut them. I'm gonna get a little bit of frosting on these, and then we'll cut them and get them onto the plate. I don't like to get this all dirty with the icing portion. So there's a seam, the bottom, you want on the bottom. And what I'm going to do is take my icing, the buttercream, and I'm going to seal this up. And I don't really care how it looks. I'm more concerned about sealing the moisture in and not leaving holes so that it can dry out. Because these are like sponges. They're going to collect every smell in your refrigerator, and they're going to dry out. This is a crumb coat because it's important that you get the whole thing covered. All right, so let me just, and you can tilt this guy and get it underneath. And if you lift up your spatula, you are going to pull the cake up, so just go back and forth and do not lift. And I'm pressing this into the cake. That's what a crumb coat is. It's meant to become a seal with the cake. So you want to push it into the holes of the cake to fill them. It's almost like a spackle. It needs to be all the way to the bottom. And then I will take some of the extra and I will put it on the edge. And I'm gonna, doesn't need to be perfect because we're slicing this, but we want it to stay dry. There we go. So if you were doing chocolate and you were gonna finish this with chocolate, you would be on your way to the look. You'd already be getting to your look. You can see how if I were to put this in the refrigerator, it would really help me with the shape. I have a really good crumb coat. There we go. So there we go. My baby. Again, the lighting is not great. So we have a top and a bottom. This icing, seal up the bottom and then roll it over. I can take my offset spatula and seal this whole area, because when it is on the parchment, it'll come off the parchment. I don't have to worry about that. So this is the bottom. And if you don't lift it up, you won't have cake come off. Just go back and forth and push it in. All right. So this helps me because when I flip it over, I'm more likely to be able to do the whole thing and keep moist. So I'm gonna do that. Now the bottom is on the bottom. You see that? Easy, easy. I'm gonna fold this. And a crumb coat is to protect it, because if you just took your decorative, let's say, pastry brush or bag and started piping squiggles of different colors and chocolate, and you're not covering the cake, it will dry out and fast. All right, so I'm going to, and it's flattening a little because the whipped cream is so soft, but I'm just gonna keep moving. I like to give everything a rest in the refrigerator and not go too fast and give things time to catch up. But for demo purposes, just know this is possible if you were in a hurry, because it doesn't, I promise you, it does not have to be perfect. So I'm gonna take the excess, put it on the end, and just cover it up. Okay? If you're doing an entremet style, those are often, you know, they've got inserts of fruit gelees and what else? Crunch layer and mousse and things like that. Those are formed in a silicone mold. So they're already shaped. Sometimes they're a little esoteric. They're an impression of a log. They get glazed. So they're a little bit different. And there we go. Okay, so this guy's covered. So then what I can do is place these onto my cake stands. Anything that I add decoratively I can clean up easily. If you try to cut these and put them on and ice them on a plate, a cake board, or a stand, it's gonna be a mess. This is the bigger guy. I think what I'm going to do is take this rounder one, because this one is skinnier, and I'm gonna cut it on the diagonal and I'm gonna place it on here. And cut it like this, diagonal on the side. I'm gonna do this. Okay. You will have to clean up the board. So that's okay, even though I've got the bottom on the side. I think I'm gonna leave this like this and I'm gonna put it on this guy. So I don't recommend doing this all at once. So this is gonna go here. These are going to be the branches of those and little guys. Just a little so it'll fit in. Be a little bit big. want a wedge or a triangle for the branch part. Doesn't make sense when you look at it this way, but when we get done icing it, it will look like, I'm gonna use 1 star tip, and I bought icing to make it easy and to show you that you don't have to make everything from scratch. When you add a tip to a bag, you push it all the way to the end, and you just run your scissor across, it's ready to go. Remember, buttercream like this gets a crust. It's meant to crust up. If you want to stick things on the icing, you have to do it while it's doesn't have a crust still. So if you want to sprinkle things on it, they won't stick if it's been allowed to dry out. So I'm going to make sure this stays clean. You can put icing on it and use a fork to go back and forth and leave a design, or you can use an offset spatula. It doesn't have to be anything that is fancy or specifically meant for cake decorating. You just want it to look rough like wood is, like a log is. I would typically add a little bit of red food color, a tiny bit. Deepens the color of chocolate. And so I would make 1 icing, and then I would take half out, and then I would darken or enhance the other half so that I have a little bit of contrast. All right, so what you're gonna do, and this is just a little guy, for an example, is you are going to take your icing and go back and forth like this, very random, not super organized. And I'm not doing the ends yet. You want to fill that in so that where it meets, it's not going to dry out. And then I'll take the other color. Let's just pretend like this is another color. And then I'm going to go over it a little bit. So you will squiggle over, be very non-linear. So you can crisscross. It can be as thick as or thin as you want. And you go back and forth. And if these were different colors, it would look kind of cool, but it's fine. All right. One is a star and the other is flat, so that kind of gives it a little bit of contrast. And because I can see the icing, I definitely want to cover it up. Okay. So you can see it's not perfect. So then I want to do the ends, and there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can either take your bag and just make a circle, like so. Or you can put it on and push it around with a palette knife. But I'm gonna do it this way. On this one, I'll do it differently on the other. And you can use tools to create more of a swirl. And again, I really like it if there's 2 different colors for contrast. All right. Okay. Let's start in the middle, go around. And when we put some decorations on here, it's going to look amazing. So some of the white icing is touching the chocolate, but the cake is covered. And if it's not, and I see a part that isn't, make sure that I cover it up so it doesn't dry out. All right, so that guy's done. So this is what it looks like, okay? It's a little crazy. It's a little crazy. I acknowledge it's crazy. So first I'm going to do the back and forth. I'll do it a little bit faster than how I normally would. And if you do this, I would do the icing underneath a very similar color. I would not do it separate from what I've done. I did it for teaching purposes so that you could see what is actually happening. All right. Fill it in. So these are something that if you run a small business, you do not have to spend a lot of time on this. There is no reason that these shouldn't be a quick 20-minute start to finish, like literally all the decorating. All right, so let me cover it up a little bit more. You can sell these for a lot. I've done these, I mean, if this looked really good and it was all finished, depending on how many it serves, I mean, we're talking, depending on where you live, $75 to, I mean, $100. It could be more if it's a really good job. What kind of fillings you use, things like that. I want people to do this and have a good time. If you've never done it before, or if you're involving other people and you want to have fun, it shouldn't be stressful. If I want, I can take this spatula and make it smoother and fill in areas. It's not gonna hurt. There are a lot of different looks online. You can look to get inspired. And at this point, you can treat it like a regular cake and your icing can shape it. So once we get this covered, then we can start putting the decorations on it. You can see how cute it looks. From the advanced, you know, sort of gum paste stuff to the fun, easy. Okay. All right, here are some of the things that we can do. Instead of buying a lot of dragées in different sizes, I buy whatever combination containers they have. This makes life a lot easier. This is what I call disco sugar. It's very sparkly. This is what is called Belgian sugar. They're very pretty. And they're this big, okay? Like this. It's like rock sugar. Belgian pearl sugar, beautiful. And then I accidentally smushed these, but I bought pistachio muffins, and I'm gonna use this for a little bit of green on here. Marzipan is great for shaping into pine cones, making into leaves. You can make mushrooms out of those as well. If you want to sprinkle any cake with like a powdered sugar treatment, you need donut sugar or sucrose. It's called non-melting sugar. So if you take regular 10X and put it onto this cake, even after it's crusted up, it's going to disappear. You could also just use chocolate chips on this, would look really pretty. I think a vanilla bean would look good. And I think that for this color scheme, coffee beans look beautiful. The other thing that is really lovely, fresh rosemary. Let's just say this is a little foot and this is the top. You dip the mushroom into white chocolate to make it stick, but this will solidify pretty quick. So I'm just gonna put it here to dry or cool. But I usually do all of the mushrooms at one time, and I make like a little hole in the middle like this. And then I take the stem and I dip it in the candy melt or whatever, and then I put it in the hole so that it can kind of catch on. And again, I would use white candy melts, but this will dry. And we're just gonna stick stuff onto our, mushroom, adore more. Just enough so that we have something to look at. There we go. Last one. spatula that's flat like this, you can get into all the nooks and crannies and clean it really well. But you want it clean before you start putting stuff on. So I would go through and wipe everything down and make sure that there were no mistakes or messes before I added all of the decor. Pistachio cake. A little bit like moss. Not too much. I kind of want to add things in thirds. In other words, I have one over here, I have one here. So I have a little bit of green, a bit of green. Tuck it in. Tuck it in. 1, 2, 3. I took a white box cake and I put 3 different dyes in it, just kind of marbled them in. Is the same thing that I just did. It's very pretty. And so instead of those that I did, this is a little mossier. So these have a couple different color areas. So I think using these different colors in a decorative way would be really pretty to add to the cake. So this is really pretty. Twig, I'm going to like that. This is whatever you want it to be. This is the part where you get to decide the style. I always decide what the design is going to be in advance. I would never just show up and start placing things. Here, maybe across. And I feel like this needs some color. I usually use red. Put the mush here. All of these can be dusted. So you can also take egg whites and dredge your rosemary and then dredge that into sucrose, and you can do that with cranberries as well. And this will help it come together. Guy. So I rely heavily on sugar flowers and sugar decorations, and I take gum paste and make little balls. I choose my color scheme in advance. So this is one little guy, very rustic. So if you want to see what I can really do with a plan, go to my profile page because they're there. But this is a lot of fun. And you can get as advanced or as commonplace in terms of what you have around your house as you want. So I have gum paste from other projects. So you take just a little bit and it becomes a red ball. I think that this looks way better than using the cranberries. And you can make these in advance and let them dry. And if you want to get fancy, you can put a little black dot on them like they would have in nature, but you can see how the little smaller details will start to really pull this together. And you want movement, you want all these things. So it's a little goofy. It smells good. But I think I will be making a fancy one, so you will see a video. Fun, fun, fun. This is the one little guy. And this is the bigger guy. I mean, this is what you can do with just putting things together, slapping it together, no super big plan. But I always make a plan. I know where I'm headed. I choose a color and I stick to 3 colors, and then I can do other shades of that color. So if I decide to do chocolate, red and white, or green, and I can do 3 shades of green or 3 shades of red, like a pinky, a red, and a darker red. But I try to stick to 3 so it doesn't get crazy. If you're going to do fresh herbs and fresh fruit, stuff you have around the house. You want to keep it light and kind of fun. That's one way to go. If you're going to be putting time into doing a little bit of marzipan or gum paste work, you want to do all of that kind of same genre. So if you're going to go more elegant, go all the way. If you're going to be rustic, do that. If you're going to be playful and just kind of fun and a little less professional looking, more like family fun, then just relax and lean into it and enjoy it. All right, well, phew. Yeah, I agree. I could have done some of the cakes in the fridge. You're exactly right. But figuring it out. So if anyone has questions about their bûche or you want any inspiration, go and look around. Go to Pinterest, Google it. I mean, there are so many ideas you can implement. And some of it's just taking nail scissors and clipping a ball of marzipan and making it look like a pine cone, or sticking almond pieces into the pine cone. But it's just like gingerbread house decorating, just for a Yule log. Now I have the itch. I'm gonna have to redeem myself. I would love a pumpkin Yule log with cream cheese filling. That would be delicious, and I think it would look really pretty, don't you? So pretty. And I love making the outside of the cake white or creamy, because actually that looks really pretty with blues and reds and pinks, and it doesn't need to be Christmassy, but you can add figurines. So if you find, the dollar store, wherever you are, cute little trees, plastic mushrooms, things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's really fun. You can use chocolate chips and Jordan almonds and anything you would on a gingerbread house, you can use on a Yule log. Yeah. Flaked coconut is great, and desiccated coconut. And I like flaked coconut either white like this because it's really big pieces, or toasted, which can give it a little different look. Vanilla beans look really nice, and just like shiny, different sizes. Candies, licorice, you could tie into ribbons. It's really not that hard if you use this recipe for the Genoise, and I did a whole video on YouTube on the jelly roll. Look it up, it's on the PoP Baking Club playlist. That's the hardest part, and you really can cut it any way you want it, cover it any way you want it. There are no rules, and it will look great. And if you do it, please send me a photo. I'd love to see a picture. Can I cut into one of them? Oh gosh, it's gonna be messy. A mess. There's a twig. It's very soft. See how it's flat? It should be more round. You put it in the fridge and you smush it back into shape. That is where you gain control over keeping it nice and round. Let's see. And it's even soft to cut. When you serve it, you absolutely want to serve it with a meringue mushroom or something like that. Yep, it's flat. And that's because it's just soft. All right, everyone. I'm gonna go have a night with Dave. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. It was good seeing you. Thanks for coming. All righty, take care. See you on the other side.